Okay, here we go. And like I said, I'm going to try and run through this and hopefully get you out of here like an hour and a half or less. Okay, maybe closer to an hour and a half to 2 hours, but it will be. It's really interesting because right here we're going over integrated marketing, communications, and distribution strategy. So it's really interesting. Basically, as a marketer, your goals are very, very simple. You're either trying to create awareness, you're trying to build a positive image, identify prospects, build channel relationships, or retain customers. Oh, jeez. This is just a rough day. There we go. All right, so this is an example of when you're trying to actually create awareness among the brands. So what Tide is doing here is during the Super Bowl, they had a sponsorship with the NFL. And so they ran print ads, they did product-related placements, so you can see like the NFL branding right on the unit, and then they also ran commercials.
They're not just colors. They're an instant bond. They're your birthright. They're heirlooms. They're irreconcilable differences. They're a city united. So protect your colors with Tide, the only detergent tough enough for the NFL. Because they're not just colors. They're everything. Tide, trusted by all 32 teams.
And because they had it across pretty much everything, this is called an integrated marketing campaign. So they had it in the print ads, they had it on the product, they had it online, they ran television commercials, radio commercials, everything was all integrated together. The other approach that marketers want to do is also just to create a sense of a positive image. So in this example, AT&T is, I mean, it's not a product, right? So it's very hard to kind of promote something that's not a product, it's a service. It's very amorphous. And so what AT&T is trying to do is actually build a brand up and get a positive brand association with it. And so when we look at this, there's no product that's actually even shown within the commercial.
Possible. Expand your boundaries of can. See what's on the other side too far. Play the angel's advocate. Outsmart can. Put a restriction on your limits and expect to be wowed. Explore, try, do. Because before it could be done, it could be. These are indeed amazing times. Rethink possible.
So the point of that really was to try and get consumers to say, oh, you know, I feel positive, or I feel inspired, or I feel like AT&T is really caring about what I as a person value in my life. The other thing the marketers try and do is to identify prospective customers. So where you're probably familiar with this the most is when you go to Dominick's or Jewel and you actually buy something and it starts spitting out all those coupons at the end. That's actually called the company is called Catalina. They're based out in California. When it first came out, it seemed really cheesy and people were like, why do I have all these extra receipts? Well, what is really happening is based on your purchase behavior is what's driving those receipts. So if you went to Dominick's and you purchased a shopping cart worth of goods, and I went to Dominick's and I purchased my own shopping cart worth of goods, we'd probably end up with different coupons. So it's really interesting to see what kind of comes out. What I used to do, when they first came out with these loyalty cards, I wasn't sure if I wanted these companies to have all that information about me. So I actually ganged up with a bunch of my friends and we all used the same card and kind of diluted the data. Now as a marketer, I'm like, well, that wasn't cool. So the other thing you want to do is you want to build channel relationships. So you're not trying to really attract the consumer. What you're trying to do is really get in good with the retailer. Because if I'm Coca-Cola and I'm distributing through Target or Walmart or whatnot, in this case it's Target, I want to get in so good that that Target feels the need that when I'm doing a promotion, they're going to put that extra effort into it and build displays that are really eye-catching and in a great spot within the store. Marketers are also trying to retain customers. So not only are we trying to find new customers by looking at their shopping behaviors and habits, we're also trying to retain the customers that we do have. So, I mean, the way that's most familiar to most of us now are these loyalty cards. But when you think about it, if you go back like 7 years, these were very minimal and they didn't exist. And now what you see are the advent of cards like Belly that are multiple retailer loyalty cards. So it's very interesting to see the loyalty market increase. So as a marketer, what you're trying to do is you have all these different ways that you can spend your money. As a marketer, you're spending your ad budget to try and increase revenue. And so the ways that you can do that is through advertising, sales promotion, public relations, direct marketing, and personal selling. So advertising is the one that we're all familiar with. It's the most traditional. It's mass communication. So you're talking to a whole bunch of people all at the same time. The level of targeting that you do might be geographic, but beyond that, you're not really talking to an individual. You're not targeting your message to a specific individual. You're really targeting a pretty broad audience. So it's television, radio, magazines, and newspapers, internet, mobile, and even outdoor displays. So one example that's really relevant now, and I think it's a very interesting area to get into, is mobile advertising. So here's an example of what Starwood was one of the first entrants into the mobile advertising. And it's not just about having your little banner ads in the Scrabble application. It's not just about, popping up at certain times. What it is here is when somebody does a Google search from their phone, all they have to do is click to call. And what Starwood was trying to do is capture those last-minute reservations. And they were trying to go direct to the consumer. Where a consumer might typically go to hotels.com or they might go to Expedia to do a booking, Starwood was like, nobody's calling our reservations desk anymore. How can we get into that market? How can we tap into that? And the way they did that was through this click-to-call campaign, and they saw a 20% growth in their mobile bookings just through that. So the next one would be sales promotions. And this is where you as a marketing manager are trying to get directly to the consumer and get them to buy something by giving them a coupon, a sweepstakes, or a refund. Something that you're doing is you're trying to incentivize them to purchase. Public relations. This is an interesting one because a lot of people don't see this. I come from a journalism background, and when I hear that public relations is actually controlled by marketing, I get all offended and up in arms. But it's true. Anytime that you come out with a new product release, you are working very closely with the public relations team to try and influence consumer sentiment before anything even happens. So I don't know if you guys have seen the Mueller Fruit Ups. It's a new product that came over. It's another product that came over from Germany. PepsiCo teamed up with a German manufacturer to bring this kind of yogurt to the United States. So they built a factory last August, and they just started releasing products into the market like this season. And so what they're doing is they have press releases all over the place. So it's press releases, it's product placements in movies, it's sponsorships, anything like that. Then you also have direct marketing. And when I said advertising was talking to a big, broad audience, direct marketing is actually where you're targeting an individual, a specific person. So it's when you get your mail and there's something in there that says, here you qualify for a mortgage. John, you qualify for a mortgage. Click here, and you've got like www.specialmortgage.com/John. I mean, everything is very targeted specifically to you. And this goes really in depth. There have been, especially for high margin products. So with insurance, for example, there is a study, the best case study that I've ever seen was there was a direct mail piece that went out, and the idea was to try and upsell you from your current insurance product into something else, like a college fund. And so what they did was they sent out a direct mail letter. On the inside, it was personalized with your name. It was personalized with your portfolio information. So if you had a mortgage, this is how much you currently owe. Here's what your interest rate was. Here's how much the interest rate has fluctuated over the past 5 years and how much you've saved. And then it even got into the picture. So if they knew you were a family, they showed you a picture that had a family. If they knew your ethnicity, they showed you a picture that had a family of that ethnicity. I mean, it even went as deep to really try and personalize that email. And they did a test, and it showed that that one actually, the personalized email or the personalized direct mail piece actually had like a 50% higher conversion rate. So it's very effective. It's more costly, but if you target it correctly and you position it correctly, it's actually very effective. Personal selling is face-to-face communication with potential buyers. Do any of you guys like shop at Akira? So, no. So Akira, have you really?
Yeah, like men's.
I guess they do. So Akira has the most amazing personal selling staff that I have ever seen. So when I walk in there, I'm usually walking in there to buy a present for somebody, but they'll look at me and all of a sudden I've got a dressing room filled of stuff that they've picked out for me. Do they do that for guys too? So it's phenomenal. I mean, that kind of personal selling, and what happens is if you notice like the conversion rate there, it's so hard to say no if somebody's gone through this trouble and they've personally sold something to you based on what they think you need. So it's very, very effective. And so as a marketer, you've got all these different tools. You got advertising, you got public relations, you got personal selling, you've got direct mail. And so as a marketer, you're really determining how much to spend where. And so what this is just showing is over the course of time, we're seeing a lot more money being spent on online and digital. But basically, as a marketing manager, you can choose where to spend your money. All right, so the way that you choose your promotional mix, it's really, you think about the consumer and what you're trying to get the consumer to do. So with the new product release with this Mueller Fruit Up thing, it was very interesting because I started, their campaign is, it's pretty much, when you start looking for it, and you'll start seeing it, I bet, after this class, there's billboards everywhere. You'll see buses that have been sponsored by it. Television commercials are all about how it's not really yogurt. It's a little bit different than yogurt. And they're not really telling you how it's different. They're just saying that it's different. So it's kind of intriguing. So what they're trying to do is just, at that point, they're just trying to build awareness that the product exists. And then the next step is they want you to understand what the product is. So if you go to festivals and a lot of to the art fair, the Gold Coast Art Fair, I think that was just on. A lot of Chicago art fairs, you've got the poor guys making like minimum wage standing there handing out all of these samples because they're trying to get you to try it so that you're convinced of, oh, it is different, oh, it is interesting. And at that point, you know, you're convinced that it's pretty good. You're looking through the Sunday paper and boom, there's a coupon there. Or all of a sudden it appears in your Facebook feed and it's like click here to get a coupon. So you're starting to see like all of those steps. And it's all definitely planned out. And I thought what was really interesting, and I pulled this from their press release because that was also part of their marketing mix. If PepsiCo wants to get into this market, there's a real opportunity to drive growth by expanding the number of eating occasions for yogurt. So this is exactly that same idea that we went over in the first lecture, which was I'm trying to get you to consume more yogurt. People only have yogurt in the morning when they're running to the bus or they're running to the train or whatever. But now what Pepsi and Mueller are trying to do is it's not something you would just have for breakfast. It's a post-workout snack. It's an evening snack. They're really trying to portray it as something else. And you can see that exact same thing with other yogurt brands who are trying to say it's indulgence. You have it after dinner. So they're really trying to get people to, you must not like yogurt. I don't really like yogurt either. They're really trying to get people to consume more of it. And it's interesting. So for PepsiCo, when you think about it, I mean, this would be on the Ansoff matrix, would probably be diversification because they're going after a new audience. They've never done yogurt before. It's definitely diversification. It's a new product and a new audience that they're going after. So as a marketing manager, once you put together your entire promotion mix, you justify it on the basis of how much revenue it actually brought in. So it's great if you go out there and you've got this great integrated campaign for Mueller Fruit Ups. But if you can't show the relation between all that money you just spent and an increased revenue in sales, then you're screwed. So different ways to do it are by using coupons, and the way you measure the effectiveness of a coupon is you take a look at sales of that specific product during the redemption period. If you ran a coupon in a specific geographic region, you can compare the performance of that product in that region to another region. If you're doing a discount, so you're not, with a coupon, it's typically for like 50 cents off some product. A discount is probably going to be like 10% off your entire purchase at Macy's or something like that. When you do a discount like that, to see the effectiveness, you're typically looking to see an increase in the average order. So when you're shopping with a 10% off pass, and you know you're getting 10% off your entire order, The idea is that you're buying more items because you want to apply that discount across multiple products. You're probably going to spend more. So if you're trying to measure the revenue associated with a commercial, so the Miller Fruit Ups, you're probably going to see, okay, well, are we getting any new customers in? We'll measure the number of new customers that have purchased the product during the time that the commercial ran, because now you know you've attracted new consumers. Or there's probably just an increase in overall revenue generated by that product. So I don't know if any of you guys run websites. Google Analytics is a really interesting tool. It really enables you to understand the traffic that's going through your online site. It's free. If you're in the job market or looking for some sort of certification, you can get certified for this for free. Very, very effective. I use this. I've probably used it every single day for like the last 7 years. It's phenomenal in what it tells you. Not only does it tell you the traffic that comes to your site, it tells you when somebody comes to your site, how deep do they go? What pages do they view before they complete a purchase? What are the top, selling products at any given time? So Google Analytics is really great. The other tool that you use as a marketer is compete.com. This is where you can map pretty much any company and see what their seasonality is. You can also see how many visitors that they've had or what their competitive rank is to similar sites as well. So it's really interesting if you're putting together some sort of industry analysis. It's a great place to start. So assuming that once you get your MBA, you go into marketing. I know a lot of you won't, but a lot of you, no matter what, will be interacting with marketers, regardless if you like it or not. So you're gonna have to deal with it. But what marketing managers do is they determine how much they need to actually advertise, and then they determine how best to allocate that money, and then they have to determine whether or not that money was well spent. So those are pretty much the 3 things that you're responsible for at any given time. So the way that you know how much to spend on advertising, there's a lot of different ways you can go about it. The 6 approaches that are discussed here in the book are the most common. So it's percent of sales, per unit expenditure, all you can afford, competitive parity, the research approach, and the task approach. So the easiest one is percent of sales. So if we forecasted sales at $1 million, I'm just going to say, okay, well, if I know that that's how much sales are going to be, I'm going to take 2% of that, and I'm just going to spend 2% on advertising. So that's approach 1. Approach number 2, also very easy. For every unit that I sell, I'm going to spend this much. So if it's a $500 television, I'm going to spend $30 to sell that one television. If I think I'm going to sell like 10 televisions, and it's $30 per television, then $30 times 10, $300, that's going to be my advertising budget. All you can afford is the most fun. You will probably never get a chance to play with this. You're setting your budget on your existing capital. How much money do I have in the bank? How much can I afford to spend? It doesn't matter. You don't have to even put together a forecast of how many you're going to sell. I suppose if you're with a startup company and you have funding, that's probably where this all you can afford advertising approach comes in. I have $1 million that somebody gave me to spend on advertising. I'm going to spend $1 million. I don't know how many sales I'm going to get, but I have $1 million to spend. Competitive parity. I look at what Jones next door is going to spend. If Jones next door is going to spend $1 million, I'm going to spend $1 million. The next is the research approach. So this is probably the most common. You're going to pick a market, let's say Ohio, and you're going to test your ad campaign there and see what the impact of that ad campaign is, how much you're going to get in revenue from that ad campaign, and based on that, you're going to extrapolate to a larger campaign. The task approach, this is also different because you're coming at it from a different angle. You're figuring out what markets do I have to advertise to, what channels do I have to advertise through in order to achieve my revenue goal. So you're going to outline all of those individual steps, all those individual channels, and you're going to assign pricing to each, and that's how you'll set your budget. So now that you know how much you're going to spend, how do you know exactly how to allocate it? So one of the great ways, and this is probably on the creative side of advertising, is message strategy. And you're really creating a message with words, ideas, and sounds, and your goal is to really impact consumer behavior and consumer perception of your product or service. So you really want to think of who am I reaching and what exactly is the impact that I want to achieve. So here's one from Pepsi. It's very simple. The product branding is tiny, but it's very cute and it gets the point across. The next one is from Google, and it's a Google Super Bowl ad. And it's really interesting because there's no script to that at all. There was no script. All it did was show you the product and what it could do, and it created this. Nobody thinks, when you think of Google, nobody thinks of a sweet love story. So they were trying to position the brand in a way that consumers weren't really familiar with it. So what are other ways? So first you've created a message strategy. The other way to allocate it is by looking at your media mix. So you think, when do I want to do a television commercial? Do I want to do a mobile campaign? Do I want to do a direct mail campaign? Your goal is really based on how many people you're actually trying to reach. And so this is, your media mix is going to be based on, I want to hit a huge number of people in a very specific time frame. And I want to make sure that they see it a lot of times. So I want a relevant audience, and I want them to see it multiple times. So this was one of my favorite examples of a great ad. So this is a billboard that appeared at an airport. So people who traveled a lot were able to see this. I thought it was charming. All right. So now going into sales promotions, which is another type of advertising form that you would use in your marketing mix. Sales promotions really target consumers at the point of purchase. So if you're in the grocery store, if you're in Target, if you're in Dominick's and you see one of those displays, that's going to be a sales promotion. If you get a coupon for a sample, if you get a free yogurt that's handed to you, those are all promotions that are aimed at the end consumer. But you also have sales promotions that are aimed at the middlemen. So these are trade shows, meetings, marketing, collateral, and you also have promotions that are aimed at your internal sales force. So if I've got a sales guy that's going out and he's selling to different, I've got a book and I've got an agent and I want that agent to sell to multiple bookstores, I'm going to incentivize that agent by saying, if you get my books into 5 different bookstores, I'll give you a bonus. So that's a sales incentive. The challenges of running these sales promotions, though, is you're really not generating any kind of long-term buyer commitment. So if I give you a coupon and you go try something, and there's a pretty good chance that you may never try that product again unless you have a coupon, unless you really like it. So I have to have so much faith in my product that if I give you like a $1 off coupon, I'm pretty sure you're going to come back and pay full price for it. There's also a very limited ability to change declining sales of a product. So if your product is already kind of in its nosedive because it's becoming obsolete. So for example, a Mac Plus, nobody has it anymore. If I discounted that by $1,000, you're still not going to buy it. So if your product is already on the decline, a sales promotion may not have any real impact on your revenue. If the product is just crap, it's not going to work. And if you don't have awareness that is driven by other marketing channels, you're just a sales promotion is just not going to make up for it because there's no consumer knowledge about the product. So there's 2 types of marketing tactics. There's a push strategy and a pull strategy. A push strategy is whereas I, as the producer, I make a product. I'm getting that product to resellers, and the resellers are advertising to the consumers, and they're getting the consumers. There's also the pull strategy, where instead of going through agents, instead of going through a reseller, instead of going through a middleman, I'm going direct to the consumer. So the perfect example of that is music. So if you give your song to an agent, that agent goes around to all these different radio stations, like, play this song, agent played this, the radio station plays that song, and all of a sudden everybody wants to go out and buy the album. So that would be considered a push strategy. A pull strategy is if I'm Justin Bieber and I go and I put my music up on YouTube, and all of a sudden everybody's watching my YouTube video. Some agent comes to me and says, "Okay, now I want to create your album," and so that's called the pull strategy. It goes the other direction. There's also, and this is exactly what I just said, marketers use various distribution channels to promote their product to the end users. In the example we use with Justin Bieber, there's an agent. You also have like organizational distributors. Walmart would be a good example of a distributor. And direct marketing. So this is where a manufacturer sells directly to the consumer. So a perfect example of this is Apple. When Apple created a product and then they opened up physical stores and they're selling directly to the consumer. An example of indirect marketing would be Apple again. And instead of Apple selling through its store, now it's selling through Best Buy. So now Best Buy is that intermediary. So your distribution channels, when you think about it, it depends on your coverage area, the desired degree of control, your distribution cost, and your channel flexibility. Distribution coverage is going to depend on intensive distribution. So intensive distribution is, I want it to be everywhere because I know you're not going to travel just to get it. If I sell toilet paper, I am not only going to stock it at the 7-Eleven. I'm going to make sure it's at 7-Eleven, that it's at Walmart, that it's at Target, that it's at Dominic's, Jewel, wherever you're going to be, because I know if you need toilet paper, you're not going to travel an hour just to get it. I need it to be everywhere that you could possibly get it. On the other hand, there's also selective distribution, and so that's something that's like Rolex watches. So I know if you want a Rolex watch, you have no qualms about going to a very specific jeweler, a Rolex licensed jeweler, in order to get it. Another example of exclusive distribution is the Budweiser red light. I don't know, I don't think you're a hockey person, but the Budweiser red light, you could only get it in Canada.
We are late in the third period. This may be still all 1-2. Looking for an open man, throws it over to Lando. Lando, shot possible. Under 3 to go. Don't make any plans for the night. Bodies are flying everywhere in the carpet. Now Dubois collects the bucket. He'll send it all the way down the ice. Here's Shanko. He finds Lando. Lando intercepted the puck, put back out to center. Shanko, he shoots. He scores!
Thing was awesome. So what it did was, it was a red light. It was hooked up to an RSS feed somewhere in Toronto where they review all the goals, and every time a goal went off, you would have it programmed to your team. So if your team was a Blackhawks and the Blackhawks scored a goal, it would just start going off. It was really incredible. And so I actually got one for a friend of mine. I had to have it shipped to somebody I knew in Canada. Then I had to have her bring it over to Chicago. And then when he signed up for it, he had to pretend like he was in Canada. So he ended up setting up a fake Twitter account, a fake Yahoo account, everything that was based in Vancouver. And he eventually got it working. The unfortunate thing is I think that the reason why it was exclusively distributed in Canada was because the light went off 7 seconds before we actually saw a goal scored here. So it would have given him a pretty good advantage. So when you're selecting a distribution channel, manufacturers really have to decide how much control they want to impose over their sellers. So Deer Foams is a slipper, and you see it in basically every single department store during the holiday season. It is all over the place, and unfortunately, when you see it in the retailer stores, very often it's going to be marked down at a discount. What's interesting is when you go to Deer Foams directly, when you go to their site, deerfoams.com, it's almost always going to be priced higher than it's going to be at like JCPenney or Macy's. And the problem with that is because when Deer Foams is selling to the guy who sells into JCPenney, this guy here is trying to get JCPenney to take a big order. So he says, I'll tell you what, I'm getting 25% of this. I'm going to I'm only going to take 20%, you take the remainder. So JCPenney ends up with this huge margin that they can play with, and Deere Foams itself doesn't have the ability to play with that kind of a margin. The other, skipping slides here. When we take a look at distribution costs, when you try to calculate this, like I want to get into JCPenney, I want to get into Target, I want to get it into the stores by Christmas. All of that encompasses transportation, order processing, opportunity costs related to the inability to meet customer demand. I had a client that was expecting a shipment of inventory from China in time for the holiday season. But what was really interesting was, and it was really cool because they would actually send her snapshots of the ship as it crossed across the Atlantic to say, look, it's not surrounded by pilots or by pirates. But when it got to California, and this was, it was going into the LA docks, and this was right before Christmas, and she needed that inventory, she needed that stock. They were like, look, it's there. We can take a picture of it. You can see that it's in LA, it's in the port. But there was no dock available because Walmart had taken up every single slot, so she couldn't get her inventory in, even though it was sitting right there across. She could see the ship. Walmart had effectively blocked off every possible access to it, and so she ended up getting it a little bit later. This shows you the power of Walmart and their distribution channels. Other costs involved in distribution are the cost of carrying inventory. How much is it costing me to rent out that warehouse? How much is it costing me to have a forklift guy, drive through it? Another really interesting piece of technology that I've seen lately, I think it might be IKEA. Their warehouse, they realized if they don't turn on the lights, they save a significant amount of money because the warehouses are huge. It takes a lot of electricity to power those lights. So they're like, well, we can't really have our workers work in the dark. But they realized, well, we can have robots work in the dark because robots don't need light. So what they did was they invested in some robots. They made sure that every single inventory stock item had like a barcode. And so the robots would just go through, look at the barcodes, and then bring everything back. And they ended up saving up a lot of money in the long run. It's very interesting working with distribution cost. Channel flexibility is a manufacturer's ability to adapt to changing conditions. Walmart was a great example of it. Again, I mean, they were the first ones who were like, well, we're going to build all of our Walmarts out in the suburbs because that's where our audience is. And then Walmart realized, well, you know what? There's a lot of people in the city too. And if you live in the city, you tend to have a higher level of disposable income. You're probably going to make more frequent purchases. I think it's time for us to get into the cities. But they can't afford that humongous footprint. So what they did was they created the Walmart Express. This is the one right at Chicago, and it's focused on groceries. And it's been doing very well. And what was interesting to see was as soon as Walmart introduced the Express, I think Target was watching it, and they saw, okay, well, it's been a year and a half and it hasn't failed yet. So now you have Target developing these smaller metro stores. So there's one on State Street downtown.
Is there a problem with
Yeah, that's their problem, right?
Okay, yeah. Was there a problem with if you run the air or someone we don't want full out Walmart, in our area?
Totally. There's a big discussion too because all the small mom and pop retailers are like, we can't compete against that. Yeah. So I mean, I think that's why there was. I think that's why Target was like, I don't know if it's going to succeed or fail. Let's just wait and see. It seems to be a success. Like they haven't changed anything at all. And interestingly enough, the protests have completely died down. Whole Foods is another example. They just opened a Whole Foods in like an area of Detroit that's kind of like economically disadvantaged. Huge public outbursts of all these people saying, why are you putting this here? I can't afford to buy an organic tomato. And but Whole Foods did a lot. They did their marketing channels where they put together a press release. They did this press junket. They reached out to the community. They handed out like free bags, and they changed their pricing as well to match the demographic. And after the store opened, all of that public sentiment went away. Now everybody's like, great, you're reviving the economy. You're bringing jobs into the neighborhood. So completely switched. So it's interesting. Really? I think it's great. I mean, it's great to see a company like Whole Foods. I mean, their mission statement has always been fantastic, right? They're not denying that they want to make a profit. I think it's very honest. All right, so historically, back in the day, distribution channels really competed against each other. As a manufacturer, I wanted all of my agents to compete against each other because in the end, I would get the best deal. What they're realizing now is that you end up with more revenue if you have all of your distribution channels working together. So if I've got my distributors and my suppliers and they're working together as a team, as opposed to competing against each other, we're both going to be more successful in the long run. So for example, there's what's called vertical marketing systems, and there's 3 types of them. There's an administered system, a contractual system, and a corporate system. So an administered system is where you have a single person in the supply chain, a single party in the supply chain that's like super strong and dictates what everybody else is doing. Walmart is a perfect example of this. One of the most interesting advances in retail technology that Walmart ever did was the use of RFID tags. And they made all of their suppliers put RFID tags onto their inventory. So when the inventory arrived and crossed through the Walmart distribution or loading area, the inventory would automatically record into Walmart systems. And Walmart basically said, well, if you don't put RFID tags on your crates or on your products, we're just not going to take shipment of it. So that would be an administered system. The next type of system is a contractual system. And this is where you've got an independent contractor that's working with the manufacturer. They've got an agreement. They've got an agreement on pricing, on where you're going to get supplies. The perfect example of this is a franchisor. So somebody who owns a franchise, somebody who owns a McDonald's, or somebody who owns a Dunkin' Donuts, they're agreeing to, it's theirs, but they're agreeing to sell those donuts at a fixed price. And they're agreeing that they're only going to buy their flour and their cake mix and their vanilla syrup or whatever. They're always going to buy it from Dunkin' Donuts headquarters. So that would be a contractual system. The next one is a corporate system. And this is where you've got a single, somebody within the supply chain owns multiple steps within that supply chain. So forward integration was when Boise Cascade, that's those guys who make paper, when they went and they bought Office Max. So they were a manufacturer and they bought one of their retailers. A backward integration is when IBM bought a chip maker. So IBM decided, well, I don't want to have to continually negotiate for new chip prices. I'm just going to buy a supplier and not have to deal with it ever again. So those are the 2 ways that you can have a corporate system. You also have wholesalers, and I'm sure a lot of us are pretty familiar with the idea of wholesaling. These are just merchants who buy and take title to goods in large quantities. Costco, Sam's Club. They store and they physically handle those goods. They're responsible for them, so they pay up front. They carry the inventory. It's theirs, and they're responsible for selling and making a profit on it. A lot of times they'll just buy a huge quantity. They'll set the price. They'll manage the inventory, and they're just going to resell it in smaller quantities to the end user. And so that's like when you take title to the goods. If you don't take title to goods, but you're a wholesaler, you're going to be called like an agent, a broker, or a manufacturer's representative. So as a wholesaler, there's a lot of competition to try and bring products into your wholesale market. And so the way that you're going to compete is you're either going to say like, look, I've got category exclusivity. Anytime somebody is looking for tires, the first person they think of is me. So why would you want to go anywhere else? So that would be something like category exclusivity. Relevant geographic reach. If you're selling ice, you want to sell it to the hot states. I don't know, that's a really bad example. Relevant geographic reach is if my target audience is Texas, then I'm saying that I'm a wholesaler who has access to Texas, and I'm very specialized in Texas. Or it just could be a lower cost. So there's lots of different ways to do it. So there's 2 types of retailers. Now moving on to the retail side of things, which is my area of expertise. There's 2 types of retailers. You got store retailers and non-store retailers. Pretty simple distinction. If you're a store retailer, you actually have a brick and mortar presence. You can sell through company-owned stores, franchised outlets, or independent stores or chains. Alternately, you could sell through your own online site or through a retailer site, but you still have that store. To decide on whether or not you want to go as a store retailer or a non-store retailer, you're going to evaluate the geographic relevancy, demographic relevancy, reputation, inventory makeup, and store characteristics. So, for example, if you were an Akira and you were looking for a new place to put one of those stores, you're probably not going to put it in the middle of like Podunk, Iowa. The reason is you don't have any audience there. It wouldn't be worth paying for the overhead of having a store in Podunk, Iowa, because you'd have to get inventory out there, you'd have to hire people out there. The fashion trends aren't as metropolitan as you would find in a larger city like Boston. So those are things that you're going to be looking for. In terms of store retailers, it breaks down into a few categories. It breaks down into mass merchandisers. So these are people who have a broad product selection, Kroger and Costco. But it also breaks down into specialty retailers. Gap and Best Buy are a perfect example. Gap only sells pretty much some sort of clothing, or Best Buy sells electronics. So those are specialty merchandisers. You also have convenience stores, and these guys are smaller, but they're very much based on how close are they to the audience that you're trying to hit. Convenience, the parking is always very convenient. 7-Eleven, Quickie Mart, perfect examples of convenience stores. If you're a non-store retailer, you're going to sell through catalogs and direct mail. So you're trying to reach consumers at home or work. You've got a lower overhead because you're not paying for a store, you're not paying for retail space, you're not paying for a cashier, you're not paying for a personal seller. Levenger, Oriental Trading, those are both companies that are very large and sell exclusively through catalogs and direct mail. You got multi-channel marketers, so you're using both traditional and online means to drive sales. JCPenney is a great company to watch right now, especially because they've got these brick and mortar stores. Those brick and mortar stores lost a little bit of the brand panache. But what they tried to do is, the first thing they did was actually jazz up their website. They didn't go into their stores and remodel everything. What they did was they changed their logo, they changed the logo on the website, and they refreshed the website so it didn't look like a catalog anymore. It looked more engaging. Instead of taking pictures of the products, they took pictures of the products on people that looked like they're actually doing something. So the pros of doing an online store it's very cost efficient because you don't have to pay for the stores, you don't have to pay for salespeople. You can distribute your goods globally. You're not restricted to your immediate geographic area. And it really fosters development of one-on-one interactive relationships with customers because you can have the online chats. There's a lot more engagement. The customer is looking at products and they won't really reach out to you unless they have a question. The consumer generally educates himself on a purchase. So the conversations you have with them tend to be more engaging because they're not about silly things like, is this in stock? It's more engaging because it's like, will that shoe look good with this outfit? The cons of having an online store is your price competition is ridiculous because pricing is so transparent. It's so easy for me to see, if I buy this computer on this site, how much does it cost me on like 5 other different sites? So your pricing is really, really competitive. And it really does not work if you're trying to go B2B. B2B online hasn't really taken off, mostly because it requires a very high-touch relationship. If you're a non-store retailer, that means you can also, instead of just selling online, you also might have a vending machine, you might do infomercials, you might do direct sales. All right, since nobody is here, is there any objection to skipping the case study? Is there anybody particularly interested in going through the case study? I'll make a deal with you. If you want to go through the case study, I'll be here. If you don't want to go through the case study, I'll just let you guys go. I have your midterm. What was your last name? Marvin? Who else doesn't have their midterm? Somebody else came in? Everybody has their midterm here? The reason I asked that is because all you guys are going to get 10 points on this quiz and nobody else is going to get points. So, and the way that I'm tracking if you're here or not is whether or not I have your midterm. Does everybody have their midterm? You're getting a bonus 10 points. The quiz, yeah, that's good. Yes, the quiz is actually having a midterm in your hand right this very minute. If you have it, you got 10 points. You got double points too. Okay. All right, guys. That was exciting. I guess you go ahead, take off. I'll be here if you have any questions. Thank you for coming in. Email me if you have any questions. Bye.